Captain Jiho Kim stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars through the wide window. The Taeguk was far from Earth, exploring empty space where no human had gone before. It was quiet work, but Jiho liked the peace. After 20 years, in the Space Navy, he enjoyed missions that did not involve fighting. His ship was small but strong. The Taeguk had a crew of 50 people, all good at their jobs. They mapped new star systems and looked for planets that humans might want to visit. Someday, it was important work, even if it was not exciting. Jiho was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started beeping. He put down his cup and walked to the communication station where Nari Park was working. She was the best person on the ship for understanding alien signals, which was why Jiho had asked for her on his crew. "What do you have, Nari?" Jiho asked. Nari looked worried as she pointed at her screen. "Captain, I am picking up a signal. It is very weak, but it is definitely not natural. Someone is sending a message. Can you tell where it comes from?" "Yes, sir. It comes from a system about 40 light years from here. But Captain, this signal is strange. It does not match any known alien communication methods." Jiho felt excited. First contact with a new alien species was rare and important. Most aliens already knew about humans and stayed away from them. The galaxy thought humans were dangerous because Earth was such a hard world to live on. Other species called humans Deathworlders and were afraid of them. "Can you understand the message?" Jiho asked. Nari shook her head. "Not yet. The signal is using patterns I have never seen. It will take time to decode it." "How long?" "Maybe a few days. The signal keeps repeating, so I have plenty of data to work with." Jiho nodded. "Make it your top priority. I want to know what they are saying." For 3 days, Nari worked on the signal. She barely slept and forgot to eat meals. The other crew members brought her food and coffee while she sat at her computer, trying different ways to understand the alien message. On the 3rd day, she finally broke through. Jiho was in his office when Nari called him to the bridge. Her voice was shaking. "Captain, you need to hear this. I have translated part of the message." The bridge crew gathered around as Nari played the decoded signal. A voice spoke in heavily accented English, clearly translated by computer from the original alien language. "Please, anyone who can hear this message. We are the Villani people. Our world is dying. We are under attack by the Keth Empire. They have destroyed our colonies. They have killed millions of our people. We have tried to make peace, but they will not listen. They say we are weak and must serve them or die. We are not warriors. We do not know how to fight. Please, if there is anyone in the galaxy who will help innocent people, we beg you to come. We are sending our location. Our children are dying. Our planet burns. Please help us." The bridge was silent when the message ended. Jiho felt something cold in his stomach. He had heard about the Keth Empire before. They were known as cruel conquerors who took over weaker planets. "How old is this message?" Jiho asked. "Based on the signal strength and distance, I think it was sent about 6 months ago," Nari said. 6 months. Jiho closed his eyes. The Villani might already be dead. "Captain," said his first officer, Minhua Ryu, "what do we do? We are just one small ship. We cannot fight an entire empire." Jiho knew Minhua was right, but he also knew something else. He thought about his grandmother, who had told him stories about the Korean War. She said that sometimes good people had to stand up to bullies even when the odds were bad. "Set course for Earth," Jiho said. "Best speed." "Sir, we are going home. Admiral Daeho Lee needs to hear this message." The trip back to Earth took 2 weeks. During that time, Jiho could not stop thinking about the Villani message. He imagined children crying as bombs fell on their world. He thought about parents trying to protect their families from soldiers who showed no mercy. When they reached Earth, Jiho went straight to Terra Command. Admiral Daeho Lee was an old friend who had served with Jiho years ago. Daeho was now one of the most important military leaders in human space. Jiho found Daeho in his office, reading reports. The admiral looked up with surprise when Jiho entered. "Jiho, I did not expect to see you. Is your mission finished already?" "No, sir, I came back because of this." Jiho handed him a datapad with the Villani message. Daeho listened to the recording with a serious face. When it ended, he was quiet for a long time. The Villani, Deho said slowly. I have never heard of them. Neither had I. But Nari researched them during our trip back. She found old exploration reports. The Villani are herbivores, Admiral, plant eaters. They have been peaceful for thousands of years. They have never fought a war. Deho stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the busy spaceport below. Ships came and went constantly, carrying cargo and people across human space. The Terran Council will never approve military action, Deho said. Our policy is clear. We do not interfere in alien conflicts. I know, sir, but we cannot just ignore this. Deho turned around. What are you suggesting? Jiho took a deep breath. What if it was not official? What if some ships just happened to be in that area? You mean volunteers? Yes, sir. Soldiers who choose to take leave and explore space on their own. Deho smiled grimly. That would be very dangerous for the volunteers, and for the officer who might accidentally let them know where to go. Yes, sir. Very dangerous. They looked at each other for a moment. Both men understood what they were talking about. If they helped the Villani and the mission failed, their careers would be over. If it succeeded but Earth did not approve, they might face court-martial. But Jiho remembered his grandmother's stories. Sometimes doing the right thing was more important than following rules. How long would it take to organize such a volunteer mission? Deho asked. If someone was very efficient, maybe a week, Jiho said. Deho nodded. Then I suggest you take some leave, Captain. You look tired. Maybe you should visit some old friends in the fleet. Talk to them about interesting places to explore. Jiho smiled. Thank you, sir. I think I will do that. As Jiho left the Admiral's office, he felt scared, but determined. The Villani were strangers from across the galaxy, but their message had touched something deep in his heart. Humans might be called Deathworlders, but that did not mean they had to be cruel. Sometimes the strongest thing was to protect someone weaker than yourself. He thought about the Villani children mentioned in the message. Maybe they were still alive. Maybe there was still time to help. Jiho made his first call to Commander Minho Choi, an old friend who commanded a battle group near Mars. If anyone would understand, it would be Minho. The rescue mission was about to begin. Commander Minho Choi listened to the Villani message 3 times before he spoke. He sat in his quarters on the battleship Iron Mountain, his weathered face showing no emotion. But Jiho knew his old friend well enough to see the anger building in his eyes. Plant eaters, Minho said quietly. They are killing plant eaters. Will you help? Jiho asked. Minho stood up and walked to his wall display showing his battle group. 12 heavy warships floated in formation around Mars. Good ships, with experienced crews. My people deserve to know what we might be getting into, Minho said. I will call a meeting tonight. If they vote yes, we go. If they vote no, we stay home. And if command finds out? Minho shrugged. Then we find out if following orders is more important than doing what is right. The meeting that night was supposed to be secret, but word spread quickly through the fleet. By the time Minho gathered his senior officers, representatives from other ships were asking to attend. The conference room filled with captains and commanders from across the solar system. Captain Hyejin Yoon came from the stealth destroyer Silent Storm. She was young but had a reputation for being fearless and smart. Commander Wonho Jung arrived from the outer system, where he ran cargo ships between the mining colonies. Even some civilian captains came, wanting to know what was happening. Jiho played the Villani message for the assembled officers. The room was completely silent as the alien voice begged for help across the vast emptiness of space. When it ended, Captain Yoon was the first to speak. How do we know this is real? It could be a trap. It could be, Jiho admitted. But our xenology, experts have studied the language patterns. They believe it is genuine. The Villani appear to be exactly what they claim to be. A peaceful species being wiped out by bullies, Minho said. The question is what we do about it. Commander Dong-hae Kim from the heavy cruiser Seoul's Pride raised his hand. What kind of numbers are we talking about? How big is the Keth Empire? Jiho had been dreading this question. According to our intelligence, the Keth control about 50 star systems. Their military has roughly 2 million combat ships. The room erupted in worried voices. 2 million ships was more than the entire human navy. Even if every human warship joined the mission, they would be badly outnumbered. We would be flying into a meat grinder, someone said. It would be suicide, said another. Minho held up his hand for quiet. Maybe, but let me ask you something. How many of you have children? About half the officers raised their hands. How many of you would want someone to help your children if they were in danger? Everyone raised their hands this time. The Villani have children too. They are crying for help and no one else in the galaxy will answer. Maybe we cannot win, but we can try. Sometimes that is enough. The debate went on for hours. Some officers worried about their careers. Others talked about duty to Earth versus duty to innocent life. A few suggested sending a message to the Galactic Council instead of taking military action. But gradually, the mood in the room changed. These were soldiers who had sworn to protect others. The idea of ignoring desperate aliens who were being murdered did not sit well with them. When Minho finally called for a vote, the result was unanimous. Every officer in the room volunteered for the mission. Over the next 3 days, more ships kept arriving at the rendezvous point near Jupiter. Word had spread through military channels across human space. Captains were taking emergency leave and bringing their ships with them. The volunteers were not just military. Civilian captains modified their cargo ships with weapons and armor. Mining companies sent their heavy industrial vessels. Even luxury yacht owners showed up, their pleasure craft bristling with improvised gun mounts. Jiho watched the growing fleet from the bridge of his ship and felt amazed. He had started with one desperate message, and now hundreds of ships were gathering to answer it. But the Keth Empire was watching too. 3 days after the fleet began assembling, a sleek diplomatic ship arrived from Keth space. Ambassador Kyungjae, Lim, one of the few humans who worked with alien governments, came aboard Admiral Daeho's flagship for an emergency meeting. The Keth Empire has sent a message, Lim said, his face pale with worry. They know what you are planning. Daeho sat calmly at his conference table. Around him were the senior commanders of the volunteer fleet. The room was tense as Lim read. The alien ultimatum. The Keth Empire warns all human ships to stay away from Villani space. Any interference in their legitimate expansion will be considered an act of war. They have graciously decided to give humans one chance to avoid destruction. Withdraw now or face the consequences. What consequences? Asked Captain Yoon. Lim activated a holographic display. It showed a massive fleet of alien warships in perfect formation. Thousands upon thousands of vessels stretched as far as the eye could see. They sent this recording to prove they are serious. This is just one sector of their military. They have dozens of fleets like this. The human officers studied the display in silence. The Keth ships were sleek and deadly looking, clearly built for war. Each one was probably equal to a human cruiser, and there were millions of them. We cannot fight that, whispered someone. No, agreed Daeho. We cannot fight that and expect to win through superior firepower. Then why are we even considering this? Lim asked. Dr. Sujin Han, a xenopsychologist who had joined the mission to study alien cultures, cleared her throat. May I explain something? About human psychology? Daeho nodded. The Keth made a mistake, Sujin said. They assume humans think like they do. They believe showing us their strength will make us back down. But humans have an unusual trait among galactic species. We bond with those we perceive as innocent victims. The more hopeless the Villani situation appears, the more determined humans become to help them. That sounds like a recipe for extinction, Lim said. Perhaps. But throughout human history, some of our greatest victories came when we fought for others instead of ourselves. We fight harder for our children than for our own lives. We die for strangers if we believe they deserve protection. The Keth do not understand this. Minho leaned forward. So what do? We still cannot win a straight fight. We do not fight their kind of war. Daiho said. We fight ours. Over the next 4 days, the volunteer fleet continued growing. Ship after ship arrived, until the space around Jupiter looked like a military convention. There were heavy battleships and tiny scout vessels, military transports and converted cargo haulers, even a few research ships whose crews wanted to help. The final count was staggering. 50,000 ships had volunteered for the mission. TO was the largest human fleet ever assembled, but it was still vastly outnumbered by the Keth Empire. Jiho stood on the observation deck of the command ship, looking out at the incredible sight. Ships of every size and shape floated in formation, their running lights creating a field of stars. Each one represented people who had decided that some things were worth fighting for, even against impossible odds. Nari Park joined him at the window. Do you think we can save them? She asked. I do not know, Jiho admitted. But I know we have to try. The Villani message has been broadcasting for 6 months. They might already be dead. Then we make sure their killers pay for it. The why? Departure ceremony was simple. Admiral Daiho spoke to the entire fleet over the communication system, his words broadcast to every ship. We go to help strangers, he said. We do not know if we will succeed. We do not even know if we will survive. But we know that innocent people are dying, and we are the only ones willing to answer their call for help. Today we discover what it truly means to be human. One by one, the ships began jumping to hyperspace. The Taeguk was among the first to make the transition, carrying with it the message that had started everything. Behind them came wave after wave of human vessels, disappearing into the void like shooting stars. They were going to war against an empire with millions of ships. They were probably going to die. But they were going anyway, because sometimes doing the right thing mattered more than surviving. In the empty space where the fleet had been, only Ambassador Lim remained in his diplomatic ship. He sent a message to Earth explaining what had happened, then began the long journey home to report that humanity had just committed itself to an unwinnable war. But as he watched the last human ship disappear into hyperspace, he found himself wishing he was brave enough to go with them. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system, and Jiho felt his heart sink. Even from millions of miles away, he could see that they were too late. The beautiful blue-green world that should have been peaceful was glowing with fires. Smoke clouds covered entire continents. Communications scan for Villani signals, Admiral Daiho ordered from the command ship. Sir, I am picking up weak transmissions from the planet's surface, reported the communications officer. But most of the orbital infrastructure is gone. The space elevators have been cut. The orbital cities are just debris now. Captain Heejin Yoon's voice came over the fleet channel from her stealth destroyer. Admiral, I count approximately 50,000 Keth ships in system. They have the planet completely surrounded. Some of their vessels are conducting what looks like hunting operations. Jiho activated his ship's long-range scanners and saw what Heejin meant. Keth warships were chasing small civilian vessels that were trying to escape the planet. The alien ships moved like predators, herding the refugees into kill zones before destroying them with overwhelming firepower. They are hunting them for sport. Minho's voice was filled with disgust. They are not even trying to capture prisoners. Dr. Sujin Han spoke up from the science station. This matches Keth behavioral patterns from our intelligence files. They view other species as prey animals. To them, this is not war. It is extermination for entertainment. Admiral Daiho was quiet for a moment, watching the systematic slaughter on his tactical display. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, with controlled rage. All ships maintain formation. We go in together. Jiho, I want you to take a small team down to the planet's surface, find survivors, and establish contact. The rest of us will deal with the Keth fleet. Sir, there are 50,000 enemy ships, someone protested over the comm. Then we better get started, Daiho replied. Jiho selected a small landing party consisting of himself, Nari Park, Dr. Sujin Han, and 6 Marines led by Sergeant Gunho Lee. They took a fast shuttle and headed for the planet while the main fleet prepared for battle. The shuttle flew through clouds of debris that had once been Villani space stations. Jiho saw pieces of alien architecture floating in the void. carved with beautiful flowing designs that spoke of a culture that valued art over weapons. Now it was all wreckage. The planet's surface was worse. Entire cities had been bombed into craters. Forests that had grown for thousands of years were burning wasteland. Rivers ran dark with ash and worse things. The Keth had not just conquered this world, they had tortured it. Nari guided them toward the strongest Villani signal, which was coming from what looked like a natural canyon system. As they flew closer, they could see that someone had built shelters in the cliff faces, trying to hide from the orbital bombardment. There, Sujin pointed. Those caves have been modified. Someone is definitely alive down there. They landed the shuttle on a rocky ledge and approached the cave entrance carefully. The Marines kept their weapons ready, but Jiho hoped they would not need them. The last thing the Villani needed was to be frightened by more armed strangers. Voice called out from inside the cave, speaking in the musical language Nari had learned to decode. She responded slowly, using the translation software to speak basic phrases. Gradually, figures began emerging from the darkness. Jiho's first sight of a living Villani took his breath away. They were tall and graceful, with long limbs and large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Their skin had a faint green tint like new leaves, and they moved with flowing motions that reminded him of dancers. But these Villani were not dancing. They were terrified. Many showed signs of injury. Some carried children who clung to them, with desperate fear. All of them stared at the humans with the look of prey animals who expected to be killed. An elderly Villani stepped forward, leaning heavily on a carved walking stick. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she carried herself with dignity. When she spoke, her voice was musical even through the fear. Nari translated. She says her name is Arantel. She is the council mother, the leader of her people. She wants to know if we are here to kill them or capture them. Jiho holstered his weapon and knelt on the ground in front of the old female, making himself appear smaller and less threatening. He spoke slowly, letting Nari translate each word. We are here to help. We heard your message. We came to protect you. Arantel listened to the translation, then said something that made several Villani gasp with surprise. She does not believe you, Nari reported. She says all the strong races take what they want from the weak. She asks what you want in return for helping them. Nothing, Jiho said. We want nothing except to see you safe. This translation caused even more surprise among the Villani. Arantel studied Jiho's face for a long moment, then asked another question. She wants to know why you would help strangers when you gain nothing from it. Jiho thought about how to explain human nature to beings who had never known war. Because it is right. Because you asked for help, and decent people answer when someone calls for help. Arantel's large eyes filled with tears. She spoke rapidly in her musical language, and other Villani began to weep as well. She says they have been alone for so long, Nari translated, her own voice breaking. She says they sent their message into the void hoping someone would care, but they never really believed anyone would come. She thought all the strong races were like the Keth. Dr. Sujin knelt beside Jiho and spoke gently to Arantel through the translator. Can you tell us what happened here? We need to understand so we can help you better. The old Villani story was heartbreaking. The Keth Empire had been expanding for decades, taking over world after world. The Villani had been spacefaring people once, with colonies on dozens of planets. But as the Keth advanced, the Villani had abandoned their colonies and fled rather than fight. We are not warriors, Arantel explained. For 10,000 years we have known only peace. We grow things. We make beautiful objects. We study the stars and write songs. We do not know how to hurt others. One by one, their colonies had fallen. The Keth would arrive, demand surrender, and begin what they called processing the population. The lucky ones were taken as slaves. The rest were killed for entertainment or simply because the Keth enjoyed destroying beautiful things. This is our last world, Arantel said. Our final home. We have nowhere left to run. The Keth came 6 months ago and began their bombardment. They could have killed us all quickly, but they prefer to make it slow. They hunt our children from orbit. They destroy our food supplies and watch us starve. They have turned our paradise Into hell because they find our suffering amusing. The ground shook as explosions echoed from somewhere above. Through the cave entrance they could see Keth fighters strafing the canyon walls, searching for hidden survivors. How many of your people are left? Sujin asked. Perhaps 1 million on this world. There were 50 million when the Keth arrived. The numbers hit Jiho like a physical blow. 49 million innocent people murdered for sport. He thought of his own family back on Earth and tried to imagine watching them hunted like animals. Sergeant Gunho Lee approached with his comm unit active. Sir, Admiral Daeho is requesting a status report. The Keth fleet is moving to intercept us. We have maybe an hour before the shooting starts. Jiho looked at Arantel and the frightened Villani faces surrounding her. These people had suffered horrors he could barely comprehend, yet they had never given up hope that someone would come to help them. Tell the Admiral we have made contact, Jiho said. The Villani are everything we hoped they would be. Peaceful, intelligent, and completely innocent of any crime except being too weak to defend themselves. He turned back to Arantel. Council, Mother, I must ask you to trust us. My people are going to fight the Keth fleet. We will probably lose, but we will buy you time to evacuate your survivors. We have transport ships that can take your people to safety. Arantel listened to the translation, then asked a question that made Nari hesitate before translating. She wants to know how many ships you brought. 50,000. And how many ships do the Keth have? Jiho met her large, wise eyes. About 1 million. Arantel was silent for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. She says that proves you are not like the Keth, Nari translated. She says a Keth would never fight a battle they could not win easily. Only someone who truly cares about others would face such odds. She says she believes you now. The old Villani reached out with a trembling hand and touched Jiho's face gently. When she spoke again, her voice was full of wonder. She says the Keth call your species Deathworlders. They told the Villani that humans are the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. But she can see now that you are dangerous only to those who hurt the innocent. She says humans are not predators. You are guardians. Above them, the battle for Valanus was about to begin. 1 million Keth ships against 50,000 human volunteers. The odds were impossible. But as Jiho looked at the hope beginning to shine in Arantel's eyes, he knew they had already won something important. They had proven that not all strong races were bullies. They had shown that someone in the galaxy still cared about justice. Now they just had to survive long enough to matter. The battle began at sunrise over the Villani homeworld. From the cave where Jiho waited with the survivors, they could see flashes of light in the sky as ships died in the void above them. Each flash meant that someone was never going home. Admiral Daeho had positioned the human fleet between the Keth Armada and the planet. 50,000 human ships faced nearly 1 million alien vessels in a battle that every computer simulation said was hopeless. But humans had never been good at accepting what computers told them was impossible. Commander Minho Choi led the first attack, charging his battle group directly into the center of the Keth formation. His heavy battleships opened fire with everything they had, their weapons lighting up space like angry stars. The Keth had expected the humans to try some clever strategy, but instead, they flew straight into the teeth of the enemy fleet. Iron Mountain to all ships. Minho's voice crackled over the comm. Remember why we are here. Those people down there are counting on us. Make every shot count. The Keth responded with overwhelming firepower. Hundreds of their warships concentrated their fire on Minho's battle group, turning the space around them into a storm of energy beams and missile explosions. The human ships took terrible damage, their armor burning away under the alien assault, but they did not retreat. Even as his flagship began to break apart around him, Minho kept pushing forward. His sacrifice allowed Captain Hyejin Yoon's stealth destroyers to slip through the Keth lines and begin attacking their command ships from behind. Down on the planet, Arantel watched the battle through Jiho's tactical display. Her large eyes were filled with tears as she saw human ships dying to protect her people. Why do they not run? She asked through Nari's translation. They could escape. They could save themselves. Because running would mean leaving you to die, Jiho explained. Humans do not abandon people under their protection. Dr. Sujin Han was monitoring the fleet communications from her portable unit. What she heard amazed her. Instead of panic or despair, the human voices were becoming more determined. As the battle turned against them, it was as if facing impossible odds made them stronger. Fascinating, she murmured. They are entering a psychological state I have never seen documented. Their protective instincts are overriding their survival instincts completely. The destroyer Busan Thunder took a direct hit from a Keth battle cruiser and began spinning out of control, its hull breached in a dozen places. But instead of abandoning ship, the crew stayed at their stations and kept firing until the reactor exploded, taking 3 Keth ships with them. When the cargo hauler Lucky Dragon found itself surrounded by enemy fighters, Captain Wonho Jung made a decision that shocked even the Keth. Instead of surrendering, he rammed his lightly armed freight ship directly into the alien flagship. His final transmission, a simple message. For the children of Valanis. The Keth Admiral Vexthor watched the human tactics with growing confusion. His species had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never faced an enemy like this. When outnumbered, most races either retreated or tried to negotiate surrender. These humans seemed to become more dangerous the closer they came to death. They fight like wild animals, one of his officers reported. They show no concern for their own survival. No, Vexthor corrected, studying the tactical display. Animals fight for themselves. These creatures are fighting for something else, entirely. He was right. The humans were not fighting a normal battle. They were fighting like parents defending their children, like protectors who would rather die than fail in their duty. Every human ship that died took multiple Keth vessels with it, and the survivors fought even harder to honor their sacrifice. But courage alone could not overcome such terrible odds. After 6 hours of battle, the human fleet had been reduced to fewer than 10,000 ships. The Keth losses were much heavier than expected, but they still had hundreds of thousands of vessels remaining. On the planet's surface, Sergeant Gunho Lee approached Jiho with grim news. Sir, Keth ground forces are landing in the northern continent. They are beginning surface operations. Jiho activated his communicator. Admiral Daeho, we need evacuation transports. The Keth are moving ground troops. Daeho's voice was strained when he answered. Negative, Jiho. All our transports are engaged with the fleet action. You will have to hold position. Understood, sir. Jiho turned to Arantel, who had been listening, to the conversation. Council Mother, we need to move your people deeper into the cave system. Keth soldiers will be here soon. But Arantel surprised him. Instead of showing fear, she stood up straighter and spoke with new strength in her voice. She says no, Nari translated, looking confused. She says they will not hide anymore. Council Mother, I understand you are brave, but your people are not soldiers. The Keth will kill everyone they find. Arantel spoke rapidly, her musical voice carrying across the cave. Other Valani began to gather around her, and Jiho was amazed to see something he had not expected. They looked determined. She says the humans have shown them something new, Nari translated. She says for 10,000 years, the Valani believed that peace meant avoiding all conflict. But watching your people fight for strangers has taught them that sometimes peace must be protected. She says they cannot fight like warriors, but they can help in other ways. Over the next hour, something remarkable happened. The Valani survivors, who had been hiding in terror for months, began to emerge from their caves. They could not fight the Keth soldiers directly, but they could sabotage equipment, guide human forces through secret paths, and provide intelligence about enemy movements. Young Valani, who had never held weapons, began carrying ammunition for the human Marines. Elderly Valani used their knowledge of the terrain to help set traps for Keth ground forces. Even Valani children contributed by serving as messengers and scouts. The transformation was incredible. A people who had been victims for so long were choosing to resist, inspired by the sight of humans dying to protect them. But the real change was happening in space. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy that other oppressed species had heard about the battle at Valanis. On dozens of worlds under Keth occupation, slave populations were beginning to revolt. The Keth Empire, built on the fear and submission of weaker races, suddenly found itself fighting rebellions everywhere. Species that had never resisted before were inspired by the example of humans willing to die for strangers. Admiral Vexthor received reports of uprisings on 17 different worlds in a single day. His carefully planned empire was falling apart because some unknown race of Deathworlders had decided to play heroes. "Order all reserve fleets to suppress the rebellions," he commanded. "Sir, if we withdraw forces from the main battle, the humans might escape." Vexthor looked at the tactical display, where a few thousand human ships were still fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. They had held his entire first fleet here for 12 hours, inflicting casualties he had never imagined possible. "Let them escape," he said bitterly. "They have already done more damage than they know." But the humans were not trying to escape. Even as news came that rebellions were breaking out across the galaxy, they continued to fight. They had come to protect the Villani, and they would not leave until that job was finished. As the day wore on, more and more Keth ships began withdrawing to deal with uprisings elsewhere. The Keth forces remaining at Villanis were still vastly superior in number, but for the first time since the battle began, the humans had hope of survival. In the caves below, Arentel sat with Jiho as they listened to reports from the battle above. The old Villani reached out and took his hand in her long, graceful fingers. "She says something is changing in the galaxy," Nari translated. "She says the humans have lit a fire that is spreading to every world. She says this is not just a battle anymore. It is the beginning of something new." Jiho nodded, watching the tactical display as human and alien ships danced their deadly dance among the stars. He had come here thinking he was saving one species from extinction. He was beginning to realize that they might have started something much bigger. The Keth Empire had ruled through fear for centuries, but fear only worked when the victims believed they were alone and helpless. The humans had proven that someone would answer a call for help, even across the vast emptiness of space. And once that lesson spread, no empire built on cruelty could survive for long. Above them, the battle continued. Human ships died one by one, but each death bought more time for the Villani and inspired more revolts across the galaxy. They were losing the battle, but winning something far more important. They were winning hope. The news reached Earth like a shockwave. 50,000 human ships fighting a hopeless battle to save an alien race most people had never heard of. The media showed images of the burning Villani world and played recordings of Arentel pleading for help. Public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of humans demanded that their government send help. Protests filled the streets of every major city on Earth. The Terran Council, which had refused to authorize the mission, found themselves facing the anger of their own people. Fleet. Admiral Sun-Hee Kang stood before the emergency session of the council, her uniform crisp despite having been called from bed at 3 a.m. The politicians were shouting at each other, trying to decide what to do about the crisis their own inaction had created. "Admiral," said Council President Ji-Won Park, "what is the current status of our unauthorized fleet?" "Approximately 8,000 ships remain operational," Sun-Hee reported. "They have been fighting for 18 hours against impossible odds. Casualties are severe, but they continue to hold their positions around the Villani homeworld. And the political situation? Catastrophic. The Keth Empire is facing revolts on 47 worlds. Their forces are spread thin, trying to maintain control. However, they are now demanding that we withdraw our forces or face full-scale war." Councillor Young-Ho Kim, who had opposed the mission from the beginning, stood up angrily. "This is exactly what we feared. These rogue captains have dragged us into a war we cannot win." But Councillor Minji Cho disagreed. "Have you seen the footage from Villanis? Those aliens were being hunted like animals. Are we supposed to just ignore genocide because it is politically inconvenient?" The argument continued for hours while the battle raged in distant space. Finally, President Park called for order. "Admiral Kang, what would you need to support our forces at Villanis?" Sun-Hee had been waiting for this question. "Every available ship, sir. The entire home fleet, the border patrol, the colonial guard. Everything we have." That would leave Earth defenseless. No, sir. It would leave Earth protected by the same thing that has always protected us. The knowledge that humans take care of their own. And now the galaxy knows that we also take care of anyone who calls to us for help. The vote was close, but it passed. Within hours, the largest military mobilization in human history was underway. Ships from across human space began converging on Earth for the jump to Valanis. It would take days to organize, but help was coming. At Valanis, the original volunteer fleet continued their desperate fight. Admiral Deho, wounded but still commanding from his battered flagship, watched as yet another human ship died protecting the evacuation transports that had finally arrived to help the Valani survivors. On the planet's surface, Jiho helped load Valani families onto the transport shuttles. Many of the aliens were still amazed that strangers would risk their lives to save them. Our intel refused to leave until all of her people were safe, despite Jiho's urgings. She says a leader does not abandon her people. Nari translated. She will be the last to leave. The evacuation was dangerous work. Keth fighters constantly attacked the shuttles, forcing human escorts to sacrifice themselves to protect the refugee ships. But gradually, the Valani survivors were lifted to safety in the transport vessels waiting in orbit. It was during one of these evacuation runs that Admiral Vexthor made his final gambit. Frustrated by his inability to crush the human fleet quickly, he decided to challenge their leader to single combat. It was an ancient Keth tradition, meant to end battles without further bloodshed. The message came directly to Admiral Deho on an open channel that both fleets could hear. Human leader, I am Vexthor, Admiral of the 3rd Keth Battle Fleet. Your resistance has impressed me, but it is pointless. Face me in honorable combat, and I will spare your remaining ships if you lose. Refuse, and I will hunt down every human vessel in this system. Dr. Sujin Han, monitoring from the planet's surface, shook her head when she heard the challenge. It is a trick. The Keth do not honor such agreements with species they consider inferior. But Deho surprised everyone by accepting. His shuttle launched from the flagship and headed for a neutral point between the two fleets, where Vexthor was already waiting in his own small vessel. The two commanders met on the surface of a small moon. Their ships landed nearby. Vexthor was everything Jiho had expected from a Keth warrior: tall, muscular, and radiating confidence. His scaled skin gleamed under the alien sun, and his 4 arms carried weapons that looked designed for close combat. Daiho looked small and fragile beside the alien admiral. He was past 60, with gray hair and old scars from previous battles. But his eyes held the same determination that had brought 50,000 volunteers across the galaxy. You are smaller than I expected, Vexthor said in accented English. I have heard that humans are dangerous fighters, but you look like prey to me. Looks can be deceiving, Deho replied calmly. The fight began with Vexthor using all 4 arms to attack with blinding speed. His weapons were energy blades that could cut through armor, and his reach advantage should have made the contest impossible for a human to win. But Deho had not survived 30 years of military service by being weak. He moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been in life-or-death situations many times before. Where Vexthor was strong, Deho was smart. Where the alien was fast, the human was precise. The battle raged across the rocky surface of the moon while both fleets watched in tense silence. Slowly, it became clear that Vexthor had underestimated his opponent. Deho was not trying to overpower the alien. He was studying him, learning his patterns, waiting for the right moment. That moment came when Vexthor overextended himself in a furious attack. Deho sidestepped, grabbed one of the alien's arms, and used Vexthor's own momentum to send him crashing into a boulder. The Keth admiral lay stunned, his weapons scattered. Deho could have killed him easily. Instead, he helped the alien to his feet. Why? Vexthor asked, genuinely confused. I would have killed you. I know, Deho said. That is the difference between us. The words seemed to hit Vexthor harder than any physical blow. For the first time, he looked at the humans not as prey animals, but as something he did not understand. Your empire is built on fear and cruelty, Daiho continued. You take what you want from those weaker than yourself, but strength without honor ultimately destroys itself. Your own people are rebelling against you because they have seen what happens when someone chooses protection over conquest. Vexthor was silent for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he activated his communicator and spoke to his fleet. All ships, stand down. Withdraw from Vallani space immediately. Sir? Came a confused response from his flagship. You heard me? We are leaving. Later, as the Keth fleet departed and the first Earth reinforcements arrived, Jiho found himself back in the caves with Arantel. Most of her people had been evacuated, but she had insisted on staying until the last transport was loaded. The old Vallani looked different now. The fear was gone from her large eyes, replaced by something that looked like hope mixed with determination. She wants to know what happens now, Nari translated. Jiho thought about the question. The galaxy would never be the same after what had happened at Valanus. Dozens of worlds were in revolt against their oppressors. The Keth Empire was fragmenting, and everyone knew that humans would answer calls for help, no matter how dangerous. Now, we build something better, he said finally. Your people and mine working together. We will help other species who are being hurt by bullies. We will show the galaxy that strength should be used to protect, not to destroy. Arantel smiled. The first genuinely happy expression Jiho had seen from a Vallani since arriving at their world. She says that sounds like a good dream, Nari translated. She asks if you think it is possible. Jiho looked up at the sky, where human and Vallani ships now flew together in joint patrols. In the distance, he could see construction crews working to rebuild the cities that had been bombed by the Keth. 6 months ago, your people sent a message into the void hoping someone would care enough to help, he said. Today, 50,000 humans proved that someone did. If that is possible, then anything is possible. Years later, historians would mark the Battle of Valanus as the turning point in galactic history. The Human-Vallani Alliance became the foundation of a new confederation based on mutual protection rather than conquest. The Keth Empire eventually fell apart completely, replaced by smaller, more peaceful governments. Many former Keth worlds joined the alliance, their people finally free to choose their own paths. Admiral Vexthor himself became an unlikely ally, spending his remaining years working to undo the damage his empire had caused. He often said that his defeat by Daiho had taught him the difference between strength and brutality. Jiho, promoted to admiral for his role in First Contact, established the first joint human-Vallani colony on a beautiful world they named New Hope. The planet became a symbol of what was possible when different species worked together for the common good. Dr. Sujin Han wrote extensively about how the war had changed both species. The Vallani learned that peace sometimes required the courage to fight for what was right. The humans learned that their greatest strength was not their ability to destroy, but their willingness